Thanks for joining us this evening. So my name's Amanda and I'm going to talk to you this evening about the work of the Yorkshire Dales Rivers Trust and one of the projects that we're working on called Ousewem. So Ousewem stands for the Ouse Water Environment Management Project, and it aims to slow and store the flow of water using natural flood risk management techniques. And I'll explain a bit more about what natural flood risk management, or NFM, is a bit later on my talk. So I'm going to talk to you for about 40 minutes and then hopefully have plenty of time for questions at the end. I'll start with an overview of the Rivers Trust, who we are, how we're funded and what we do. I'll then talk about the Ousewem project, what its aims are and the issues that we're trying to resolve, a quick overview of NFM, and then I'll show you some of the work that we've completed. Quick word about what our plans are for the future and how we're monitoring our projects, and then I'll finish on a very short little film if the technology works. So the Rivers Trust are a national movement who work to protect and enhance the health of rivers. So the first Rivers Trust was the West Country Rivers Trust and was founded in 1994 by a group of local people who were concerned about the health of their river. And there's now 65 Rivers Trusts across the UK, including Scotland and Ireland as well. So there's a River Trust for nearly every river or group of rivers. And we're all charities. We're funded mainly through donations from the public, and we also get money from the government to carry out specific projects around enhancing and protecting river health. We're also funded from enforcement undertakings or fines. So if there's a pollution incident on a river and an organisation or an individual is fined for causing that pollution incident, then that money from the fine is donated to local organisations such as the local Rivers Trust or local Wildlife Trust, who then use that money to put right the damage. And the vision for the Rivers Trust movement is that we have wild, healthy, natural rivers that are valued by everyone. So I work for the Yorkshire Dales Rivers Trust, and we were born in 2004, and we've slowly grown to our current staff of 10, who are shown on the screen here. I'm the one on the end in the red jacket. Half of us are full-time and the other half are part-time. And we cover the Swale, the Ure, the Nidd, the Ouse and the Wharfe catchments. So instead of being called the Swale, Ure, Nidd, Ouse and Wharfe Rivers Trust, we're called the Yorkshire Dales Rivers Trust because it's a bit less of a mouthful and all of our rivers start in the Yorkshire Dales. So within Yorkshire, there's also the Ayr Rivers Trust, the Colne and Calder Rivers Trust, East Riding and the Don and Rother Rivers Trusts as well. And we work closely with our friends in other Rivers Trusts and also with our friends in other NGOs as well, like the Wildlife Trusts. So in terms of what we do, our activity falls under three themes, really. The first one is around partnerships. The second one is around project delivery. And then the third one is around education and outreach. So I'll just go through those briefly in turn. So in terms of partnerships, we coordinate and align activity across our catchment between lots of different organisations by hosting the Dales to Vales River Network. So this is also known as a CABA, or the catchment-based approach. And there's, again, one of these in most regions that cover a group of rivers. And it's a formal network that gets a notional amount of funding from the government, and it exists to bring together all the different organisations that are working in a catchment to kind of coordinate and align activity and to come up with a catchment management plan. And the catchment management plan is open for everybody to engage with. Any interested party can engage with this. And it identifies the key issues that are affecting our local rivers and then puts plans in place to help address those issues. The Dales to Vales River Network also supports citizen science programmes like the iNidd and the iWharfe water quality testing, which has supported the inland bathing water designation at Ilkley and Knaresborough. I already need a drink. So we also do practical delivery of projects, and I'll talk more about Ousewem in a minute. But this is another big project that we've currently got underway up on Tees Swaledale, and this is a metal mine remediation project. So what you're looking at here on the screen is an image of the landscape before and after we did our work. And this is an old lead mining landscape. So in the 18th and 19th century, a lot of lead was extracted from this landscape, and all the spoil and the slag and all the kind of waste from that lead mining activity was just left in big piles in the landscape. And because it's full of lead, nothing's really grown on it. And when it rains, that toxic waste washes off into the rivers. So our project has looked at how to revegetate that landscape, basically, and it's carried out lots of different trials looking at different plants, different composts, different techniques for revegetating that landscape. And as you can see, it's been pretty successful. And there's actually quite a lot of plants that will grow on toxic lead mine waste, which was surprising to me. So that's just one of the other kinds of projects that we've got underway. And then the third theme of Yorkshire Dales Rivers Trust activity is around education and outreach. So we look at all people in our community, so that's from children to the community to landowners and everyone in between. So in terms of children, we have this fantastic resource called the Rivers to You van, and this van has got this catchment table with Otto the otter perched there on the side, and you can see that's like got sand in it, and you can build little towns and villages and put trees in, and then you can tip water in and see how the water flows through the landscape. So it's like an educational resource to teach people about flooding and also how rivers work. And our education officer also goes into schools, and she takes samples of invertebrates from the local river and microscopes, and then the kids have a look at all the different things that live in the river. In terms of the community, we have a volunteering programme, and we also support the citizen science programme, as I mentioned before. And in terms of farmers and landowners, we provide advice and funding where we can to do practical things like fence off watercourses to stop cattle pooing in them, which is obviously better for water quality. We also attend most of the agricultural shows across the Dales, so the Wensleydale Show, and we'll hopefully be at the Great Yorkshire Show this summer. So that's kind of the work of the YDRT in general. Now onto my project, Ousewem. So I'm full-time on this project, and I've got a team of 3 project officers who work for me, and all of our salaries are paid for by Defra as part of the Ousewem project. So the Ousewem project is a large multi-year project which aims to reduce flood risk to communities across York and North Yorkshire using natural flood risk management techniques. It's, as I said, quite a large project, and there's various different themes and elements to it. So the first work package is being led by JBA, who are a flood risk modelling consultancy, and they're doing all the modelling. The second work package has been led by myself and Yorkshire Dales Rivers Trust, and we are focusing on the practical delivery of NFM projects on the ground with landowners. The University of York are doing some interesting academic research into what is the willingness of communities downstream to pay for flood resilience efforts upstream of them. And they're also looking at some of the kind of other wider benefits of doing natural flood risk management. So not just the flood resilience benefits, but also the carbon storage, the habitat created, and also the socio-economic benefits from NFM. And then finally, the York Council have got responsibility for what happens after our project concludes in 2027. So what's the ongoing strategy for York and North Yorkshire in terms of NFM beyond the life of our project? So we're funded by Defra, and it's part of the FCRIP programme, which is the Flood and Coastal Resilience Innovation Programme, and it's all about looking at new ways of doing flood and coastal resilience, as it kind of says on the tin. Our project covers the Swale, Nidd and Ouse. It doesn't include the Wharf because the Wharf joins south of York, so we are looking at all the rivers that flow down into York. Excuse me. And there's a lot of other organisations involved in this project as well. So we're very reliant on our chums at the Yorkshire Dales National Park and Nidd National Landscapes and Natural England, particularly for introductions to landowners with whom we can work projects up. And then both North Yorkshire and City of York Council are involved, along with various other organisations as well. So why do we need the Ousewem project and what is it trying to achieve? So we're probably all aware that we've experienced some pretty extreme flooding in our region, and this is only going to get worse as the climate changes. And we can't really keep building ever higher flood walls. It's too expensive and it often just passes the problem downstream. So we need to look at where the water is coming from and try and hold it back further upstream in the catchment. So the aim of the Ousewem project is to explore how we can mainstream NFM as an option in our flood defence work and to figure out how much NFM we need to do upstream of York in order to help extend the lifespan of the new flood walls and pumps in York. We also want to provide local flood resilience to the smaller towns and villages in the Dales. We want to build awareness of what NFM is, and we want to build capacity within local organisations such as the parks and also with local contractors and other partners. So this photo is just showing some of the flooding up in Swale in 2019. So as well as climate change, there's also been historic changes to our landscape, which have made it less resilient and which is contributing to flood risk. So unfortunately, many of our rivers look like this one in the photo. They've been artificially straightened. The bank has been reprofiled, so that 45-degree angle bank that goes all the way down there has been created with a machine. And you can see that there's no bankside vegetation, there's no trees. So this river's been kind of tidied up to death, basically. It's not a wild, healthy or natural river. And this kind of management isn't good for flooding. So having that very straight, very uniform channel means that water speeds down there very quickly. If there were more wriggles in that river, the water would have to take a longer path and it would slow down. So as the water is going down these very straightened channels, it tends to also cause more problems with erosion from the bankside. And the lack of bankside trees is also important here because it means without that bankside vegetation, there's nothing to stop pesticides, fertilizers and soil washing off of those fields and straight into the river. The lack of bankside vegetation is also not great for wildlife and biodiversity. So if you were a fish in this river, you'd be too hot in the summer. You wouldn't have anything to eat because there are no trees to drop insects and leaves and other food sources into the water. And there's no cover, so if a heron came along, it would spot you and eat you straight away. Also, the fields that adjoin this river have been obviously ploughed and fertilised. And that means that it's likely that the soil health is not brilliant. So if a field has been repeatedly ploughed, it will kill all of the earthworms in the soil. And therefore you won't have any of those little tubes that earthworms make in the soil. And that makes the soil more compacted and it's less able then to absorb water when it rains, hold on to it. And that means the water will sheet off and also your land will be more prone to cracking and drying up in drought conditions as well. So at a landscape scale, this is what some of those changes that we've made look like. And this is an image from the Rewilding Britain website. So you can see down here in the valley bottom, we've straightened our rivers. As you come up, the pasture is extensively grazed by sheep and has been for several generations. And that's resulted in a very short, very uniform pasture. So there's not very much roughness in the landscape. It's very smooth. And so that means that water can sheet off very quickly and it's not held back and stored. And there's also very few native trees in this landscape. We've got blocks of conifer plantation for forestry, for timber production, but those aren't great for biodiversity or wildlife, and nor are they great for reducing flood risk either. You can see that there's all these little streams coming down off of the hillside, and these should have trees down each side. And actually, if you don't, these can result in landslips at the bottom. Also up here on the tops where the moors are, you can see that there's some fire showing here, and this is illustrating the burning of heather for grouse moor management. And having a heather monoculture is also not good for flood risk. Really, we want our peatlands and moorlands to be very soggy and wet and to be acting as a sponge and holding that water on the tops and not letting it come down into the valley bottom and increase flood risk to houses. And down in this bottom left-hand corner here, this is illustrating that the peat has become eroded, and so you've got some peat hags forming here. And this means that the peat and the carbon within it washes out, ends up in our drinking water where it has to be removed, and it's also releasing carbon into the atmosphere, so that's not great either. In terms of biodiversity, you've got just the opportunistic kind of species in this landscape. So you've got corvids, jackdaws, crows, magpies, and foxes, and some red grouse, but there's not a great deal of other biodiversity there. And there's also not a huge amount of economic diversity. It's mainly grouse and sheep farming. So this is what our landscapes could look like in about 10 to 15 years' time if we made some changes to how we manage our landscapes. So we could reduce our sheep numbers, we could replant our conifer plantations with native broadleaf species and allow our rivers room to move and to create these braided channels that you can see on the valley floor there. This would be better for flood resilience and drought resilience too, and it would help diversify both biodiversity and the rural economy. And this shows what could happen in 50 years' time. So down here in the bottom right-hand corner, we've got beavers back in the landscape. So this is a nice big beaver dam here. And you can see the river is like wriggling around all over. We've got lots of trees. Now, this is from the Rewilding Britain website. So we've also got lynx in the tree here and a British wildcat down here. So I would just like to say that lynx and beavers are both out of scope for the Ousewem project. Yeah, but this is just an example to show what our landscape could look like. So Ousewem's not a rewilding project. Like I said, beavers are out of scope. We're not trying to get lynx back in the landscape, but we are trying to restore some of the natural processes that we've lost in our landscape by implementing natural flood management. So natural flood management is working with nature to improve the ability of the landscape to store and slow down water. And there's different NFM interventions that you can do in different parts of the landscape. And of course, that needs to fit with what that land is already being used for already. And it also needs to fit with other activities like other flood schemes, so hard engineering and property level flood resilience schemes as well. So you can see that depending on where you are in the landscapes, there's different sorts of things that you can do. So if you're up on the tops, you can do peatland restoration, block up those drainage channels, stop burning it. As you come further down, you could plant some cross-slope hedgerows. Along the watercourses, you could get some leaky barriers in and some trees. Reinstate the dew ponds that have often been filled in the landscape, allow the river room to wriggle around, and also allow the river to be connected to its floodplain. So rivers should be up and out of their banks probably every other year, and so that water can get back into the landscape again. So I'll just go through a few of those things that I mentioned and show some photos so you know what I'm on about. So this was leaky barriers. So these are logs placed across the stream, but they're above the normal flow of the water. So during normal flow, the water goes underneath unimpeded, and that allows both the water and also fish and other things to move up and down as they wish. But when in high flows, when the river comes up, these log barriers hold back some of that water and push it out onto the floodplain, slowing it down and storing it. So they're mimicking what should be a fairly common natural occurrence of trees falling into our rivers and watercourses. And when a tree falls into a watercourse, it helps diversify the flow. It introduces new habitat, it introduces food, and it slows down the speed of those floodwaters. And so we should have large woody debris in most of our watercourses. Now, unfortunately, often in the Dales, there are no trees next to the river to do that. So when we're doing our project and we're installing these leaky barriers, we also always try and fence off the area and plant trees alongside our leaky barriers so that when these ones have rotted away, there'll be trees in the landscape to fulfill that function in the future. This is a photo of a scrape. So scrapes are small, shallow, temporary ponds that fill up when it rains and then it slowly drains away. Um, these are great. You don't need to fence these off. They provide drinking water spots for livestock, and the muddy edges are great habitat for invertebrates, which are then fed upon by birds. We also like scrapes in our project because you don't need planning permission for them, so that makes it easier for us to deliver them. And they're also really compatible with existing agri-environment schemes. So if your field is in countryside stewardship or has sustainable farming incentive options, then scrapes are normally compatible with those, and you don't need to adjust your agreement in order to have these. So we can also do remeandering and wetland creation. So this photo is a good example of the sorts of soggy corners that we're after in our project. So you can see that there's a very straightened ditch going down the middle of that photo, and the water wants to come out where you can see it pooling on the surface there. So we would like to remeander that straightened channel and put some more depressions into the landscape and catch that water and allow it to basically become a wetland, which is what it really wants to do. So by doing that, it will slow down the flow of water, it will introduce roughness to the landscape, and it will allow that water to be stored. And obviously that would also create fantastic habitat for wildlife as well. So the Ousewem project has been running for 2 years now, and we've just completed delivery of our first 2 pilot projects. So this is showing the first of those. This is a small farm, mainly just cattle grazing, so it's just pasture. And we have managed to install 450 metres of hedgerow here, 10 leaky barriers, which are shown on the left. And then in partnership with Nidd and Ouse National Landscape and the Woodland Trust, we've also got another kilometre worth of hedges that they funded and just under 2 hectares of woodland as well. So in terms of the benefit for the farmer, this farmer's had basically the entire boundary of his farm has been re-fenced, and he's now got a new hedge. So works for him. We get our flood benefit, and he was happy because he got a load of new fencing. So our second pilot project, was a much larger, more upland farm, and this is kind of moorland fringe habitat. So he's just got a handful of hardy breed cattle and some Hebridean sheep. And the main income for this farm is from subsidies and schemes, and also both the farmer and his wife work off farm for several days a week, which is very common for most of the farmers in the Dales. It's not the kind of environment where you can make a lot of money out of farming, so most landowners tend to also work off farm for a couple of days a week. So this was a much larger and more complex project, and I've got a little film that I'll show you right at the end of my presentation with some drone footage so you can see some of these for yourself. So you might be able to just see in this photo, there's some leaky barriers down this watercourse. You can see these logs across the watercourse there. So we've put 12 of those in, also 15 scrapes, some willow carr habitat, and some willow carr tree planting, and also some extra woodland as well. So willow carr is a type of habitat that's a wet woodland habitat, and it used to be quite common across the Dales. And in fact, the name of this farm is Crag and Carr, so it's kind of named after the habitat that it once would have had. Because of extensive sheep pressure, though, that willow has largely disappeared because sheep do like to eat it. So this area has been fenced off, and we've replanted a load of willow that we coppiced from really locally. So we know that this is a locally native species, and because this is fenced, we'll hopefully allow that to grow, and once it's grown up a little bit, we can then remove the guards and allow the sheep back in, and the willow will be able to survive that browsing pressure once it's gotten a bit older. So we've done our 2 pilot projects now, and we're now focusing our activity on our next phase of work. So this map shows the outline of the Swale, Nidd and Ouse catchment. That's the shape that you're looking at, the big shape. And then within there, the purple and orange highlighted areas are where we're working next. So it's up on Wensleydale, Arkengarthdale, Massam, Bishop Monckton, Bellaby and Hunton. And the reason we've chosen these places is because these were all places that have flooded before, where we think that natural flood risk management could make a difference to local flood risk. So these are quite small catchments with small clusters of properties at risk. And it's in these small catchments that NFM tends to be most effective. The other reason why we've chosen these areas in particular is because of the low numbers of properties, these areas wouldn't qualify for traditional flood funding because they wouldn't meet the cost benefit thresholds to do a hard engineering scheme because there's very low numbers of property. So these areas are unlikely to qualify for other sources of flood defence funding. So my team are reaching out to landowners in these areas, and we're working with those that are willing to design and deliver NFM projects. And I think we've got a really strong offer for landowners because YDRT and my team will basically do all the work on their behalf. So they don't have to front any money. We do all of the design work. We get all of the necessary permits and consents. We take our designs through the consultation process. We get planning permission if necessary. We do all the habitat and bird surveys as necessary. We find and manage the contractors, and then we do all of the monitoring as well. So the landowner doesn't have to pay or do anything for themselves, so that's great. They do have to agree to look after the things that we install for the next 10 years though, and we give the landowner a maintenance grant to cover the cost of doing that. I should also say that we're not looking to take really productive land out of production and cover it with trees. That's not what we're about. We're looking really for soggy corners. We're looking for where we can reinstate lost hedges, where we can reinstate ponds or put in new ponds and scrapes, where we can fence off water courses and put leaky barriers along them. And we're also looking to plant trees where they will fit in the landscape. So we tend to tuck our trees down gills. We're not putting big blocks of woods like in big square blocks in the middle of fields or anything like that. So we're trying to fit our interventions into the landscape and making sure also that they don't negatively impact on either the farmer's ability to farm their land, but also on the existing biodiversity. So the parks are obviously protected because of their unique species and habitats, particularly upland birds and species-rich hay meadows. So before we do any projects, we do a bird survey and a HAB survey to make sure that we're not going to negatively impact either birds or any species-rich hay meadows or anything else. So as well as reaching out to our landowners through our contacts within Natural England, Nidd and Ouse National Landscapes and the Yorkshire Dales National Park, we're also engaging with people and with local communities through our comms activity. So on the left-hand side of this photo, you've got a poster showing a QR code, and this is called Hello Lamppost. So you put these posters on this QR code and then you scan that with your phone and it takes you to a little two-way chat with a bot about NFM, and it's just kind of a little cute, fun thing to raise people's awareness of what NFM is and why we're doing it. And as well as these posters that are on lampposts, we've also got these beer mats or coasters with the same QR code on. And so we are distributing those into pubs around the areas that we're working with. So that involves us having to go to quite a few pubs and give them beer mats, which is, a terrible part of my job. We're also talking to local flood groups and local action groups. And after lambing time, we plan to hold some pie and pint events as well in those areas that we're working to try and entice more landowners to come and work with us. So I'll just touch on monitoring and how we're monitoring the effectiveness of our interventions. So monitoring of natural flood risk management can quickly get very complex and quite expensive. So we're taking a relatively low-tech approach and largely using quite simple visual monitoring. So for all of our projects, we will collect statistics about what we've done. So the area of the new habitat created, the number of trees that we've planted, the number of leaky barriers that we've put in, and that kind of thing. We're also taking before and after drone footage, so that gives you a really nice visual image of what the landscape looked like before and after we've done our project. We're also using stage boards and wildlife cameras. So a stage board is basically a big ruler, and we attach that to a leaky barrier, and then we have a wildlife camera pointing at that, and you'll see this in the film. And the wildlife camera takes a photo every 30 minutes of that stage board and the leaky barrier. So then you can see the level of water going up and down over time. We're also doing a river condition assessment before and after our interventions, and we give all of that information to the landowner on completion along with the maintenance grant, so that they've got a record of what we've done on their land. We're also doing a bit more in-depth monitoring on just a handful of projects. So flow and velocity monitoring on 1 or 2 projects, and that's what's shown in the photo here. So if you ever see one of these in a watercourse, that's what it's doing. This is measuring the depth of the water using a hobo logger or a pressure transducer. And then you take some other measures as well to understand the volume and the speed of water travelling down that watercourse. And hopefully you can see that when you've done your interventions, you've slowed down the velocity and you've also reduced the volume because more has been stored in your interventions. And the last part of our monitoring strategy or approach is a trial of aeration. So aeration is when you basically take a big spiky roller over land and you poke lots of little holes in it. And the idea is that it introduces more air into the soil and it relieves some of the compaction. So JBA are supporting us with this, and we are going to find hopefully a couple of farms, one where we can do aeration and one where we don't, and we can put some soil moisture probes in and then assess what the difference is of that intervention. And this is quite a kind of hot topic in the world of NFM is, does aeration work? How often do you need to do it in order for it to provide that flood benefit? So our monitoring will try and answer some of those questions. Gosh, I've rattled through this. So here are some statistics so this is based on the 2 pilot projects that we've delivered and the 7 other projects that we've got in progress at the minute. So if we manage to deliver all of those 7 projects, this is just some of our initial statistics about numbers of trees that we might have planted and also the volume of water stored as well. So you can see that's over 10 million pints of water stored. So hopefully this will, yeah, you can see that film. So there's no sound on this, so don't worry that you can't hear anything. So this is some footage from our drone. This is us with the landowner. That's me next to the dog doing some water quality testing. So we put some leaky barriers and down here and planted that willow that I mentioned before. Those are the leaky barriers there. And this whole area between the fence and the wall has now got trees planted in it, and willow in particular. This was the snow and the melt, and you can see that leaky barrier and the camera just in front of it. And there's a leaky barrier holding back that water, pushing it out onto the floodplain, and then the water level drops again. And then this part is about the scrapes. And these are them being dug. And they soon fill up and do their thing. And then we've got another 650 metres of hedge plantings that's gone along this track. You can see all the tubes there. And this whole triangle area has been planted up with native species trees. And then there's just some credits that I should let you look at. So just I mentioned about the plastic tree tubes actually, since Victoria mentioned it at the start of the project. We have used plastic tree tubes on that project that you just saw in the film there, but for our future projects, we're exploring there's some new eco tubes that have come onto the market last year that are a bit better than those rubbish cardboard ones. And we're also exploring the use of lanolin as well. So lanolin is found in wool, and sheep and rabbits and deer don't like the taste of it. And you can get a spray and you can spray your trees with this lanolin spray. So we're going to look at a few different techniques for not using plastic tree guards, basically. So if you would like to get involved in the Ousewem project, if you own land or if you know of any landowners in those areas that I mentioned, do please drop us an email to ouswemdelivery@ydrt.co.uk. And if you would like to sign up to either the Yorkshire Dales Rivers Trust or the Ousewem or both of them, e-newsletters, then you can do that, and I can put the link in the chat as to how you do that. We've also got a volunteer programme, as I mentioned, so you can sign up to the YDRT volunteers on our website, and yeah, if you'd like to make a donation, then the link there is on the slide. So I've rattled through that really quickly. Sorry, I've only taken 35 minutes instead of 40, but hopefully that gives us some time for questions. Yeah, thank you very much.